All right, good afternoon, everyone. Hi, welcome to our Maricopa County Branch NAACP book club. Okay, so some people might say, why is the NAACP doing a book club? Well, because the NAACP is about education and agitation. So we need to educate people at the same time that we agitate, and we want people to fight with facts. We need facts and information in order to move forward. And this is a little connected to this comment that you cannot really have reconciliation until you actually admit and face the truth. So part of our book club initiative, thanks to Princess Lucas Wilson, who started this for us, is in line with that. What is the truth? And how do we fight with facts and information in order to make it a better place for everyone? So welcome today. And I would like to introduce our third Vice President, Princess Lucas Wilson, who many of you might already know. She is over our Criminal Justice and Law Enforcement Committee on the Maricopa County Branch NAACP. Many of you know Maricopa County Branch NAACP is the largest branch in the state. We're over 100 years. We were chartered in 1919, this particular branch. And Ms. Wilson has served with us on this branch for 5 or 6 years, as well as she is a social worker by profession. She has worked in private and nonprofit agencies, also a professor at ASU, has spent time as a professor at ASU as well as in the Maricopa Community College District. She has taught social work courses as well as counseling and victimology type courses. And, you know, she's been very, very active in the community. So at that point, I will turn the program over to Princess Lucas Wilson. Okay. Thank you very much.
All right.
She's the intellectual on our committee.
Thank you, Dr. Harden. I appreciate that introduction. And just wanted to mention before we get started that this is our third book club discussion. And we discussed 2 other books. And those books, the first one, Push Out by Dr. Monique Morris, well, she was the second book, had to do with discipline in the schools and how our girls, African-American girls, are targeted. And then the other book was The Letter to Our Sons, and that was by Dr. Imani Perry. And that book was to kind of help people think about Black males in a different way. And the letter to our my sons, kind of the impetus for it was Dr. Imani wanted her sons to maintain their humanity with all of the perceptions and whatnot that are out there about Black males. So if you're interested in either of those books, those were our first 2 books. About the author, Heather McGee, she's a political commentator. She's a speaker. She holds a JD from the University of California, Berkeley. And her background is in economics. And she's also an advocate. And so the sum of us speaks to many different aspects of how our goods and services are structured, how our economy is structured, and how it might hurt certain populations. And, you know, one of the things at the beginning of the book, or one of the things she says is, why can't we all just have nice things? Why can't we seem to have nice things? There's a lot of disparities in our country. And we see people who are extremely wealthy, all the way down to, you know, people who are homeless. And the book gives a different way to look at these issues, a different way to consider the cause of these issues. So the lack of various resources in certain communities is definitely linked to the economic gap. And there's resource challenges when there are economic gaps. And the resource challenges can lead to underground economies. Desperate people will do desperate things to feed their families, etc. Of course, and this can lead to increased policing. You know, it's sort of like a domino effect, which can lead to mass incarceration and many other issues. So when we look at the zero-sum game theory that Ms. McGee focused on in her book, that theory basically says what's good for them is bad for us, and it continues to influence our public policy. And just to this particular comment about it continues to influence our public policy, it's on a macro level, and we can look on a micro level and look at different organizations and within groups. Sometimes that attitude leads to certain behaviors and certain problems as well. The thought that if things improve for one group, then it'll affect me and I'll have less, or I'll be on the bottom. So with that, I've put together some discussion questions, and what we will do is with the questions, I'll go through the questions.
Okay.
And then you can decide which ones you want to address. And I do want to say that if you didn't get an opportunity to read the book or didn't read the entire book, we're interested in just your opinions and thoughts about some of the situations that you see in society, from inequities in education, criminal justice reform, voter suppression, all those different issues. She addresses all of that in her book. So from your experiences or your opinions, we're interested in as well. Patrick, if you'll put up the questions. And again, just so glad to see everyone here. Sometimes these topics are uncomfortable to discuss, but it's important to address them. Okay. All right. You'll see at the top of the questions, there's a quote, and it's by Albert Einstein, and it says, "A problem cannot be solved with the same conscience that created it." So that's a good way of thinking of looking at a different lens when we look at social problems. There's a lot of theories, and commentators have their opinions about, why certain situations happen. But if we use the same type of thinking that has created the problems to date, they're doomed to be repeated. So that's the significance of that problem, of that quote. And it's important to be open-minded and look at different ways of thinking. So as I said, I'll go through the questions, and then any question you want to comment on, whether it's your opinion or something in the book, we'll be happy to discuss. So the first question is, what is your overall impression of the book? What components stood out for you? Do you agree with any of Ms. McGee's assertions or her views? If so, which ones? The second question, in your opinion, why is the zero-sum game perspective harmful? Why is the perspective a false way of looking at race and public policy? The third question, Ms. McGee shares information about public pools to show how racism caused the destruction of all pools that could have benefited everyone. The question is, what other public goods come to mind that you see Americans going without because of similar attitudes? The next question, how does the example of the drained pool apply to the student debt crises over generations? What comes to mind from the book or your observations and experiences? The fifth question, has this book changed your perspective about the possible causes of inequities we see in society today? If so, in what way? And if again, if you haven't read the book, just consider the zero-sum game theory that I just kind of reviewed briefly to answer this question. And the last question says, Ms. McGee discusses the solidarity dividend as a means to address the numerous disparities explained in her book. She states we must live our lives in solidarity across color, origin, and class. In your opinion, applying the solidarity dividend, what is the best way to move forward to address racial inequities on a local and national level? Now, again, whichever question you would like to answer, whatever resonates with you to start our discussion. And with the drain the pool analogy, because of segregation, when public funds was used to build beautiful pools and parks throughout the nation, they were segregated, and the NAACP filed a lawsuit to integrate pools. And once the pools were integrated, they were filled in, the parks were closed. So with that attitude, no one got to swim, no one got to enjoy those beautiful parks or the pools. And there's numerous other examples of that. So with that, if anyone would like to speak or share, and glad to see everyone here. I think Verna just joined us, and we have Pam and Angela and Scott. So happy to have you. So again, any opinions?
Good afternoon, Princess.
Good afternoon,
This is Verna, also
Yeah.
with Mel. And also I have Melanie Bernard.
Oh, hi, Melanie. Glad you could join us.
Hello to you too. I'm excited.
Yeah,
We were
great,
talking about
great.
we were speaking that we both enjoyed the book. It is a strong read. Now, it is not an easy read, but the information that she has in the book, not only supported, unfortunately, by her research, but also if someone just has basic knowledge of being African American in this country. One of the things that I thought stood out is when I like how she incorporated childhood images as well as adult experiences, because so many times we don't understand how the trauma of some of these childhood experiences carry over into adulthood, and how those perceptions, how we're treated as children, do impact how we interact even among our peers, as well as among people in the other population. So I was glad that she included not only the adult perspective, but also what happens to people as children, and how it manifests itself and how we are seen and perceived even today in the society.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Absolutely. That point of what happened to you in childhood, we bring those experiences into adulthood. And sometimes when we're addressing those experiences, we're using our own lens and we don't take into account what has happened to people as children. So that's an excellent point. That's an excellent point. Thank you, Verna.
You're welcome.
Anyone else?
I was just thinking about your question of, examples similar to the drained pools and how this is kind of old, but how some places, rather than integrate their schools, they would like maybe close the schools, which then caused all the children not to be educated, or to maybe try to catch up. Now, it might not have had a lot of, educational damage for the kids as much as maybe solidifying the hate of people of different races, which then was passed forward to other generations. So, yeah, so, so the residual effects, economically, how much it costs to, do things like that, like close down the schools. It's economic, but it's also attitudinal, it had like attitudinal repercussions as well.
Right.
And yeah, so that's what came to my mind is like the waste of money when you had segregated schools, because you're building these separate facilities so that the groups can stay separated.
Yeah. Excellent points. Yes, definitely more.
I'd like to piggyback on that.
Sure.
I'd like to piggyback on with Dr. Harden, because I want to talk about how not only did the flight from schools, but some communities ended up building private institutions with tuition, so people could not go there, and then they siphoned off the tax dollars from those public schools. And we have some things doing like this. Some people who have merged in some of these charter schools have done the same thing. They're siphoning off public schools and public monies. And not all charter schools we know are equitable. Not all charter schools are designed to meet the needs of all children.
Right.
There are some charter schools we know they've been developed and created so that people can perpetuate their own beliefs, their own philosophies. Right. So they're still siphoning off our public dollars, which we pay money for, to meet their own needs.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that came to mind from the comments about the schools and having separate schools and private schools and the harm that could cause children and their attitudes. She cited studies that showed that integrated schools perform better than schools that are not integrated. And also she talked about the harm of hate, which can give children a distorted view of how the world really is, or if you, feel that if you feel that there's a hierarchy, even as a child, where certain people are on the top, certain people are down here, it can distort your view of reality. So it can be harmful. So absolutely.
And I think just additional, like as Ms. Verna was talking about the charter schools versus public schools. I mean, that's still relevant right now today, where you have the charter schools who their administrators have these huge salaries compared to what their teachers have, and they're exclusive of being like integrated, right, and accepting of other students. But more, as important is the fact that in theory, when you say, well, you can take this voucher, you can take the public dollars and your kid can go to a charter school. But I think overall the NAACP is anti-charter schools because in theory that sounds good, but in practicality, if the person in the inner city does not have transportation, the parent is out working, then they can't not drive their kid over to Xavier, take their voucher money and take their kid over to Xavier or wherever, or to any other charter school. So leave the money in the the neighborhood school and make that better, rather than taking the money and going off to a charter school that's not in the neighborhood. And so I agree with
Yeah, that's great. And having those resources not be available to the kids
Mhm.
that really, could use them just like any other child. So, yeah, so absolutely. Okay.
Princess, when you talk about the analogy of the drain pool,
Mhm.
that can also be applied to voter suppression.
Yes.
The voter suppression laws aren't just going to impact the minority communities.
Mhm.
There are some majority communities that will be impacted by that as well. And I think when they think about that, they really need to understand who it will impact. It doesn't just go to one side or another. Everyone will suffer from that.
Yes, everyone, making it difficult
Mhm.
for everyone to vote. And if you put those types of policies in place just using a racial lens, you might think that it'll only negatively impact a certain group. But
It doesn't.
yeah, it doesn't. And that's part of having that kind of attitude, that zero-sum game
Mhm.
where if we suppress the votes for one group, it won't affect people that look like me, not taking into account there are people that may look like you who are in rural areas, who don't have transportation, like they do in the cities, that might need more time.
There's still working folks that can only vote at certain times of the day. And
Mhm.
yeah, to your point, they're in rural areas. So yeah.
And people of all races. So it affects everyone. Mhm.
And also, like when we're talking about the voting rights, how it will hurt people. When you make those limitations, I think they might have forgot about people in the military. It'd be interesting. It would be interesting to have statistics to see what percentage of the military is made up of people of color versus others, right? Now we know that, I think we know, we got to fight with facts, right? So I don't know how, I'm making a disclaimer that I don't have the factual data on this opinion that I'm saying. I think you have people of color who are more so like on the front lines and not in the officer ranks.
Mhm, mhm.
But I wonder what that ratio is compared to how many people of color are in the officer ranks versus how many people of color make up the entire military. And
Yes.
then when you look at the fact that if those military people are deployed out of the country, and if you stop laws that say no early voting, no voting by mail,
Mhm,
then you're disenfranchising military people of
mhm.
their rights of absentee ballots, right?
Right.
And how we just saw where they were saying, what if they sign it wrong, they have 7 days to try to make a change. Well, if those military people are deployed out of the country, then they're not going to be able to come, and so their vote might get just thrown out,
Yes,
um,
yes.
and not making it easy. Let's say people with disabilities, just like
Mhm.
what you were saying, Angela, is like, it's not just hurting people of color, it's hurting other populations, and maybe, in their haste, they're not looking at, well, you're disenfranchising some of your own.
Mhm, mhm.
Absolutely.
Okay. But I think with January the 6th, they've demonstrated they don't really care. If you're not totally in their mind camp, they don't care, because it wasn't Black people killing the police officers, January the 6th, right? It wasn't people of color harming the people who were supposed to be protecting the Capitol. Yeah, so, and they didn't care. You know, they wanted to hang their own person, their own kind, right? He's not voting the way we want him to vote, so he's expendable, you know?
Yeah, yeah, it's not following our agenda.
Yeah, thank you.
And, and just the fact that with technology, you could see what happened, that traumatized the whole nation.
Yeah,
Again, people of all races, depending on your makeup and views, you know, it traumatized the whole nation. And you know, it's part of just strategies in getting people not to trust government. And there's a list of about 3 things people do like that, you know, in other countries
mhm,
to discredit the government, and it has other elements to it. But it's not the first time. But yeah, absolutely good points with that. And another area to think about briefly when we think about environmental justice, with toxins being put in neighborhoods where there's people of color. You know, there was a neighborhood in Boston, Roxbury. I used to show a video in my classes. They were dumping like rotten meat in this woman's backyard, this pile of rotten meat and all these toxins in the neighborhood. And those people got together, the community got together and turned all of that around. And it took them maybe 10 years or so, but they did it with allies and partners. So that's another area that she goes over in the book in terms of how we can affect change. And did you have something else, Dr. Harden?
oh, no, no, no.
And on that topic again, with air quality, I think one of the things she says in the book, we all breathe the same air. So if you dump toxins, and you know, I know there was a situation in Phoenix where there were tires, they were burning. You know, air travels. So there's been studies that have shown that the white neighborhoods are polluted as well, because it's the same air. So it's that narrow thinking where you think if you neglect one group, it won't affect yours. It's that same kind of thinking.
I think though it disproportionately affects us. They bring the interstate highways through the
Yes.
Black neighborhoods. Our kids have more asthma. Our kids have more lung disease. I think they, even with the voting rights, they factored in, even the people, so say young people, they're young white kids in college, they may vote more progressive. So they kind of want to disenfranchise. People on disability may vote more progressive, So I think that they factor these things in, and they know they wouldn't pass it if it wasn't going to be strategically advantageous for them.
Yeah, that's absolutely right, Scott. And that's part of that strategy, So yeah, that's absolutely factored in. Patty, did you have something to say? I saw your hand up.
Yes, I did. Well, first, I'm not, Scott, when you're saying they, were you talking about city government, or I'm not, or white folk, or?
Yeah, with the way the book is written, it talks about how there's laws and policies that have been put in place that were crafted, drafted, promoted by the majority population, white people, that didn't take in consideration or disregarded the needs of other populations. So when we say they in the context of this book, that's what it's talking about. And it's a lens that looks more at policies rather than individuals. So when we say they, it's not like a person necessarily. it's those policies and practices and procedures that go forth even today that harm.
And I'm certainly not disagreeing. I've gotten as far as 5 chapters in this book, but I also read a great book called The Color of Law, which was pretty
Yes.
eye-opening.
Yes, I have that book.
And but what I wanted to talk about, a couple of things. One, the zero-sum game really rang true for me.
Okay.
And especially with the lobster analogy,
Yeah.
you know, somebody tries to get out and no, we'll pull you back in. And it's, to me, it's fear-based, you know. And when she got into talking about the unions and how the union busting went, and we're talking about it was done primarily so that the workers would not be integrated. But although I know these things happen, I also believe that there was a pure greed factor there, that they just don't want unions because they're more expensive. It would cost.
Right.
It would impact their bottom line. We live in a country where, you know, I think it was in the book, you know, workers' raise has, you know, income has raised by 3% and CEO income has raised by 130 or 1,300%, some exorbitant number. That's so I'm not sure if it's greed or racism or a combination of each. But like you said, you got to know what you're dealing with to try to fix it.
Right. And unfortunately, when we look at if the motivation is greed, a lot of times because of the way this country is structured, you can use race as a scapegoat and get people to turn against each other. So like in the unions, some of the examples she gave was that before President Obama was elected, white people were pro-union. And after he was elected, the support for unions by white people decreased by 25%. And in some of the anecdotal information she cites where you know, people were interviewed, they in fact said that they thought, you know, because President Obama helped rescue the auto industry, they connected kind of race to that and changed their minds and thought that unions were for lazy Black people. And so they began to be against them. And that's part of sometimes how people use the term unconscious bias. Sometimes our thinking is very automatic and we don't kind of analyze it. It's like, why would you even think that? But it's a tactic that can be used, you know, by the people on top or the people you say are greedy because it works. You know, it works, unfortunately. So Patty, did those comments kind of fit with what you were thinking or something else? Oh, you're muted.
Yeah, sorry. Yes. Like I said, I'm still thinking about it. That's why I do these things is one is self-education, and two, my family members run the gamut of racism from not knowing that they're racist to, you know, yeah, of course I am. I know I'm better. And so interacting and trying to educate them and their children is something I'd like to do.
Okay, great. Well, this is a good way to do it. We have these quarterly, so you're welcome back. And Scott, did you have anything else to add? Wasn't sure.
Well, I think I like to steer away from thinking of everything as individuals. Um, if we say the power structure or the powers that be in America, that's just white men. I mean, that's the bottom line. It's just white men.
Mhm.
And so, if you
And,
say
and women.
and women, but white men disproportionately are represented in the Senate or in elected office, CEOs of companies, yeah, but women too, so I think that, and then I think the thing to remember is that, in general, white America was pro-union and didn't want black folks in the unions.
Right.
And black folks fought to be included in these unions. And then coincidentally, after black people gained access to the unions, then gradually, or the attitude toward unions changed, and it's kind of it's kind of a recurring story. We get access. Now I'm not with that. We get into public schools. Now we don't want to fund public schools. We get into, a neighborhood. We start trying to buy homes, and they want to change the rules. So, the it's actually a very depressing book to me. It reminds me of this book called Dying of Whiteness. I don't know if you've heard about this book,
Yeah, I've heard
but
of it.
it basically says, and it's the sadness of the drain pool and metaphor,
Mhm.
that you will hurt yourself to just be able to say, I'm white. To just have to say, well, I'm white and I'm better than them. At least I'm
Right.
above them in the social hierarchy, and I'm willing to deny my kid access to a pool or a quality education, or we don't want. I remember when I was in college, they didn't want the train going up into the white suburbs of Atlanta. So they're literally going to say their white kids weren't going to have access to the city, weren't going to be able to ride the train, because if they did, then that meant that we were going to ride the train out there and steal from them or something, or like in Maine, we're going to impregnate their white daughters. So I just find it, but I also find it very true. And I think what on a larger scale, there's a radio guy that I listen to, and he says billionaires pay Fox News millions of dollars to convince poor people convince middle-class people that poor people are the problem. And so the powers that be have figured out a way to racialize everything. If Obama said anything, it was black now. And I didn't necessarily find him to be the most progressive guy in the world. So, but anything he said now is a black thing, and they know that works, and it has worked, and it works over and over and over.
Right. Unfortunately, yeah. So this different perspective gives us a different way to look at it, and a different way to look at it with a realistic eye. That's why it can be depressing, but it also can be clarifying. With some of the general statements sometimes we make about why people are in certain situations. Is it their fault? Or has there been a system that, just as you have pointed out, Scott, when schools are desegregated, then the rules change, the union. So it's a lot of that. And over generations, that forces some groups, into poverty and not having resources, but it's a system. It's not an individual flaw. And that's kind of common to blame people or a neighborhood, or the term like, oh, that's the people in the ghetto act like that, or that's, and the labels come quicker with us, come quicker with us. And so that's my point I'm trying to make right now is, not to write people off, not to write people off.
The way I like to look at it, so just take the reverse though. You say, if there's a wealth gap for any other reason than racism, then that means that then there's something inherently different about us, Black folks.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And there's not.
So if you just, so you see what I mean? So
Yeah.
But society at large will just accept something like, Black folks are in jail at higher rates than white people, disproportionately impacted, and just accept that as like, okay, that means Black folks are more criminal, even if they won't really say it. Then I found it interesting in her, or Miss McGee, the author, says that now it's not our inherent intrinsic genetics, so to speak, but it's our culture. So, but like, as if you can separate our culture from who we are. But that's what, so now it's not that I'm racist. I just think Black folks have a lazy culture. And that's why they're, so,
that's why people are suffering. It's their fault.
Yeah, versus redlining, versus, de facto and de jure segregation, it's just a lot of little, facts or historical truths that have happened, and they linger. And so what I do say that's not depressing is, maybe after reading this book or after these knowledge, then we know, as she goes towards the end, the solutions have to be targeted effectively. We use equity, people say that now, but she uses that universal targeted universalism or whatever, but to say, you just can't say that vaccines are going to be free to everybody. You got to have a way to get it to the Black community or to the Hispanic community or the indigenous community. You got to have, or else it's not fair.
Right. And we've seen that.
Exactly. That's what we're seeing.
Yeah. And that wasn't the first time. So yeah. So very good points. Very good points.
So Princess, back to what Patty, kind of what Patty was saying about, you started talking about unions, like that. Well, okay, once President Obama, helped the auto industry, then it was easy to label unions as, then it took on a racial tone, right? So trying to make sure that we're using facts to deal with things. Is that similar to, and are you familiar with this information, that something to the effect that, like the Affordable Care Act, like the Obamacare, I think it was Mitt Romney, when he was a governor, had almost the same types of structure, but when President Obama was trying to get it passed, then they racialize it because he's trying to get it passed when its foundation was the same as what Mitt Romney was
Massachusetts. So
right. So is that factual, or is that similar to what we're talking about? Because then when they started labeling it Obamacare, then a lot of people started resisting it.
Yeah,
that's what the Heritage Foundation, a Republican think tank, came up with the ACA, and the trial run was in Massachusetts, right, where Mitt Romney was the governor, and Romney could have universal health care, but it was it's a corporate based, the American ACA is a corporate based kind of plan, but as soon as it became Obamacare, people didn't like it. And they even could compare ACA versus Obamacare. ACA always polled higher among white people than Obamacare did.
Okay, but are you saying, Scott, that the way what do you call it, like the principles or the format of it was the same, right? How much differentiation was it between the two? Do you know?
Well, it never happened, but there was supposed to be basically a universal plan. So, but Joe Lieberman basically scratched that out, a public option. So there was supposed to have Medicaid expansion,
Right.
universal, and a public option, which would be basically Medicare that you could buy into. And the public option, Joe Lieberman squashed that and because he's in Connecticut with the insurance companies and they didn't want the public, and then the Supreme Court was able to gut and make it where states had the option to opt into the Medicaid expansion. And so Arizona amazingly did, but most states, most conservative states did not.
Yeah, and going back to what Dr. Hardin said, the plans were very similar or the same, and it got racialized. And Scott, your your comments are, I remember all that. It was just kind of trigger you to even think about it, but yeah, they were very much the same. But it got,
Is it possible, Scott, Princess, is it possible to kind of say X percentage of the format of Obamacare is the same as was what the Heritage Foundation had created in the beginning? Can we put a percentage to similarity or differences to it, or did it get changed too much to try to do that?
No, I mean, I don't know numerically, point for point, but I was the vast majority in the concept of we're going to use private insurance and government subsidies for the general population to buy private insurance. That's a Republican Heritage Foundation plan. I mean, you think about it, that's using the free market to solve a problem. So, and that's kind of a conservative principle. Let's use the market. The market can solve it. And so that's what Romney Care, which became Obamacare, really was. The added thing was Medicaid expansion. That was there were some other things, but financially Medicaid expansion. Then, stuff like having your kids up on into their 26. That was, not being able to get ready for pre-existing conditions. That was all in Romney Care. It was just the real difference was the public option, because that's a federal thing, and you couldn't do that in a state plan like Massachusetts and Romney Care had.
Okay.
Right. I'd say 80%, Dr. Hardin.
Okay.
And that's not based on it, like Scott said, any kind of calculation I've done.
Okay.
Think about maybe 80% was the same. Yeah.
But a lot of stuff, you can move a lot of things that President Obama did, that are really kind of conservative approaches, immediately became considered to be racist, and so then they're racialized to such that now the majority of white Americans wouldn't go for it.
Right. Yeah.
Wouldn't.
Okay. Okay. Just let's try a little kind of round robin discussion to see if each of you have a comment on number 5, and that is, has this book changed your perspective about the possible causes of inequities we see in society today? And if so, why? And then I'll add, if not, why not? So we can do this kind of round robin. Let's see, Verna, are you still there?
Yes, we're still here.
Okay, all right, Melanie. I know you guys are probably, what do you call it? Double tasking or whatever, but.
You're multitasking, you're multitasking.
Yeah, multitasking, yeah. So on this number 5 question, Melanie, if you haven't read the book, not saying you haven't, but if you haven't had a chance to, just in your opinion, or if you've read the book, has your perspective changed on why we have these inequities?
I did read the book, and it was so informative for me because I never really looked, well, let me say this. What her book told me was how policies, government or policies impacted everything. And she even ended by basically me saying it's the policies that impact us. And my one for me that was really awakening because I didn't know why, but I remember when I went to school, I remember in California, school was free. When I went to school at ASU, I came out with a reasonable loan that I was able to pay off. But when my daughter went to school, it's a whole nother ball game. And I'm like, what happened? I never knew what happened. And to see it, that it was systematic and purposeful, because whenever Black folks begin to take advantage of what was free, then they determined it was time to take it away. That will stick with me forever. So that's my take on it.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Melanie. Yeah, that college was free until after the civil rights movement, and it stopped being free because we had access to free education. And that's a part of many other things that create generational wealth, and that contributes to the wealth gap. You know, we didn't get access to college education, housing, lots, loans, reasonable, normal loans, not these predatory loans. So yeah. So thank you, Melanie. Verna, do you have anything else to add?
I was just going to say, it just reinforced that we are living in terrible times as far as when it looks at policy. People need to understand the influence that people are undermining by not understanding policies and how the policies are reinforced. An example, we had voter suppression going on. We know the policy, writing the laws, people say, well, it won't affect me. Yes, it will. Not only does it affect you, it affects your taxes, it affects your resources, it affects what you can do in your communities. That's why voter suppression is more than just not being able to vote. It is bigger than that. It's an economic dilemma that's going to impact millions and millions of people. And then also the whole thing about the history. Where's cultural literacy? Oh, now we don't know about our history. Now we're going to have history suppression. And it's a whole other thing about suppressing what is wrong with this country, because we don't want to do what's right with this country. So that's it for me.
Okay, all right, absolutely. Yep, all of that. Yeah, history suppression. Yeah. That's been the case forever. Yeah. Yeah, but I like that term, history suppression. Patrick, I don't know if you're on the line. I don't know if you had anything to say.
I've been listening and taking it all in. I think I'm going to add this book to my reading list. I haven't read this, but I've got it on my list. But I guess listening to discussion and the questions, I guess what I want to add, I guess, to the discussion is what it really comes down to is, I know, and I'll go to this topic, is that critical race theory has been in our public's consciousness for a couple of weeks now, and their folks are really using it as the boogeyman for conservative circles, or white circles, white supremacist circles, however you want to look at it. And the thing is that in the quest to make critical race theory this boogeyman, or this type of thing, this red herring of an issue, it's honestly reinforcing the theory, because what is being proposed, and that put in very simplistic terms of our laws, our structures, our overall, kind of to echo what Scott said, it's not a micro thing, it's not a small thing, it's a system-wide thing, is that you see it. I mean, every issue that is not quote unquote popular, that's been discussed, things like social services, unions, public education. When all those things were invented and are introduced, and they were being, utilized, by, the white community, benefiting kind of, white supremacy in that regard, no one had a problem with it. It was great. We were the country on the shining hill. But now all those things are suddenly, harmful to America, to our country, when you start seeing Black and brown faces that are, utilizing these systems in order to counteract generational poverty, the generational effects of white supremacy on communities of color. And it just really kind of makes it all puts it really together. And like I said, the attacks on our elections, I mean, nobody had an issue. Certain folks didn't have an issue with our election system in 2016. Nobody. In 2020, suddenly everything's out of whack. And and honestly, what fundamentally changed? The outcome didn't go the way that a certain portion of the population wanted. Yeah, I mean, y'all know. So I think like I look forward to reading this book to get really into the details. But the arguments, definitely. I mean, the proof is in the pudding. It's there.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you, Patrick. And critical race theory, as we know, was only taught in law schools. We have the book. I have the book. So that's another way that reality got distorted and played into this racial grievance playbook. And it wasn't taught in K through 12, or even, I used to mention it in some of my classes. They were graduate level classes. I don't think it was even part of the content in my undergraduate classes. So it's gotten really blown out of proportion.
I can say with absolute certainty that there is no school, no K-12 school in the state of Arizona that offers critical race theory as a class. I didn't even see. My experience with critical race theory in school was probably a chapter in a book and a discussion in graduate school. That was extended critical race theory that I got, and so the fact of the matter is that, I think what people should understand is when you look at, because Arizona just recently passed a law against critical race theory. If you look at the text of the law, they do not mention critical race theory. What they're attacking, and they're using critical race theory as the boogeyman, is any kind of discussion or our education on, race, on any of those things that are in our system. So they're labeling things like teaching the civil rights movement in a class and school, and mentioning the facts of the civil rights movement, or the facts of the Civil War. That's what's now being prohibited. That's what's being taken away or being attacked.
Yeah,
and
just
they're using
basic
this
facts.
direction of critical race theory as that way to get into it.
Yeah, and I think I got most of what you said, Patrick. The end, I don't know my connection, but yeah, absolutely. Okay, Angela, did you have anything else to add?
Not much. I
Angela?
will say I did not read the book as well. However, I am very interested in doing that very soon. But I think everything that everyone said is true, and it all boils down to education. And if you do not educate yourself, you're going to be left ignorant on all of those areas, and we are doomed to repeat the past. So going back to what Patrick just said, it is important to have that education in the school systems. Otherwise, it's just going to be a full circle. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Yes. Okay.
All
All right.
I've got
Okay, thank you,
I'd like to
Angela.
comment,
Okay, Patty, did you have anything else to add?
I did, you know, as far as question 5, you know, I'm still learning because I still see greed as a major driver in pitting us together. And, but I've also seen that racism and in the law especially is getting more, it's not getting less, it's just getting hidden better. You know, a good example is the charter schools and shuffling money, public school money to charter schools is just, it's another law that hurts more than it helps. But I did want to touch briefly on the critical race theory, which is something I'd really like to learn more about. I don't know what it is, but what I believe it is just fact facing and fact finding about our own history. Now, some of my friends tell me that critical race theory means that if you're white, you're racist and you can't help it. And you will always be racist and you should be ashamed of yourself. And I tell them, no, I don't think that's true. But I do think it's true that we have ignored our own history and we can't stop repeating history until we at least honestly look at, you know, how we got to be the country that we are. You know, what we did to the Indians,
Right,
what we did to the Blacks. But sometimes progressives get a little bit too progressive, and you know, in my little progressive church, they were almost apologetic for celebrating Independence Day because, you know, of all the bad things that we've done in our history. And I don't think that's helpful either. That only feeds the, you know, the fear mongering. So again, I'm glad to be here.
Well,
I'm learning a lot, and I'd like to know when what the next book is going to be.
okay, well, before we move on, I do want to share with you that critical race theory, just as a you know, simple explanation, if you wanted to share it with folks who told you the wrong information, if you want to share it. That's just a theory that looks at systems, just like this theory, zero-sum theory. It looks at systems and how race has been a factor in creating certain barriers and systems that create inequity and discrimination. That's what it is. So the other kind of comments about it saying white people are bad and all that, to me, that's kind of people just internalizing something that they've heard on the news, or I won't even call some of those programs aren't news, but some of the commentary. You know, it's something they're just internalizing. So it's a theory like any other theory. There's tons of theories about everything. We know that, lots of theories. So it's a theory. You know, I used to teach it in my classes, and going back to what Patrick said in undergrad, it may have been a couple of sentences, maybe a paragraph in graduate school, you know, in my discipline. So it's been blown out of proportion. It's because it has the word race in it that seems to catch some people's attention. Yeah. So thank you for being here. Scott, you have anything else to share?
Well, a couple of little things. So possible causes of inequity. One thing I kind of, it wasn't at the forefront of my mind was when the government was creating these state colleges, land-based institutions, they took that land from the indigenous people. They just took it. That's how we got University of Alabama or Texas A&M. They just took it. So to show, you know, so to help me understand what's happened to indigenous communities, you know, if, you know, So that's a big thing. I kind of was jumped out of the book when I was taking a, reading through it. And then you know, I do think, and I'm still not clear on it though, is that why, when you have the concept of zero sum, why don't we look at it? It's like you're saying, if I turn the faucet on, if one person gets water, then the next person can't get water. Right. It's this notion to say, you know, if we, you know, if we let Black people into Major League Baseball, then fewer white people will be able to get in Major League Baseball. But what we end up seeing, they just make more teams. I mean, so
Right.
it doesn't, and so, just the whole concept of that, of the, if you say why, so there's a big thing in here about home ownership, right? Why couldn't we get FHA loans and VA loans? That wasn't going to stop white people from getting VA loans or FHA loans. If we got them too, it was not going to impact it. There was one I think when we're trying to get to the cause, we say, is it greed or fear or whatever? When they were talking about they were talking about the unionization of the Nissan employees in Mississippi. One of the guys, the Caucasian gentleman who was apparently pro-union, he said literally, well, maybe, or I think it was him, one of the pro-union guys said, well, if the Black plant workers made the same as the white plant workers, then they could probably buy houses in the same community and go to the same schools. And so, so it wasn't. So in the end, it doesn't even seem that it's like I'm not gonna make less money because they're making money too. We're doing the same job on the similar. It's not even that. It's that I just want to be separate, and that
a hierarchy.
Yeah, I just want to be Sarah. I just want to be superior. I just gotta have this. I gotta have, even though my overall financial wealth as white America is dropping. Now the riches, they're getting richer and richer and richer, right? But the average white person is losing, and still says, well, I can't change. I got to stay with this path because at least it keeps me above them.
Yeah. So that racial hierarchy.
It's more important. It's so important.
Yeah, and it's emotional, but some of the examples that you gave, people aren't really thinking, they're just being emotional. I don't want those people in my neighbor. Well, why do you feel that way? Is it based on any experiences or whatever? It's just all emotional, and race is the driving force. And a lot of times we don't like to talk about those things, but that is a fact. And I will say that, the problems that we're facing are huge. And so we do need to work together however we can. And it's kind of good to see recently that people of color are coming together more. And just also kind of keep an open mind and keep educating ourselves. And you mentioned indigenous people. We don't, as people of color, we don't want to fall into hierarchies either. But you do have some of that same kind of attitudes within race and across members of minority communities. For example, Native Americans own slaves as well. Yeah, it's a lot of crossover. And, it's just a lot to keep learning. Learning is a lifetime pursuit, in my opinion.
Yep.
And it's just a lot to learn. So we do need to all come together because the problems are huge. And with that, I'll ask Dr. Hardin if you have any closing remarks or things you want to add, Dr. Hardin.
Well, let's see. First, thank you. Thank you again for doing our book club, and don't let us know how soon we can have another one. Because I think this, for me, the dialogue is really, really healthy, and it's healthy and helpful. I'll go back to what I was earlier. What I said is that, and it's not my original statement, but it's like, before we can come to say, I've heard it in the sense of, before we can do reconciliation, we have to admit the truth. So I would say, before we can have reconciliation and or healing, we have to look at and examine the truth. And I guess I would say, Patty, to those folks, that you're talking with, tell them nobody's blaming anybody, right? It's not a matter of being ashamed of the 4th of July, but yes, recognize what those things stood for. And I very well, and this is a little bit tangential, but when Jeff Bezos came down from his little thing on the moon, it was a little thing on the moon, but his trip to the moon, he said something to the effect of, thank you, Amazon workers and
Yeah.
buyers, because you made this possible. Now, Patty, if that's not greed, I don't know what greed is, because I don't think that man even realized how he trivialized people from my point of view. It's like, hey, you guys, it was just, to me, it was a very, what do you call it? Cold, callous statement.
Mhm.
But he didn't even, it just rolled off his tongue.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So I'm interested in this concept, like what you said, Patty. But Scott, you said something as well when you're talking about Toyota, not Toyota, but the auto worker plant, right? When the guy says, well, no, we can't have unions because they'll be able to live next to me, right? So that doesn't have anything to do with greed. But so where is the differentiation between the impetus? How much of it, Patty, is greed and how much of it is just pure racism? Can there be a definitive answer? And maybe, or what combination is it, right? Okay, so because quickly what I'm saying, Patty, is like, when they passed ordinances in California right after World War II or so, that said that white folks cannot sell their property to people of color, right? Is that greed or is that just racism, right? Okay, so it's a hard conversation, but I'm glad we're having them, and we got to keep having them. Maybe part of it is greed, but maybe part of it is just innate racism.
Well, your comment is absolutely, about the covenants that all went into place after World War II.
Uh-huh.
Was absolutely pure racism and shocking to me.
Mhm.
I didn't even know it happened. I thought, I'm a veteran myself, and I realized that Americans after World War II had a boom of success and wealth building, and I assumed that impacted every veteran, and I was so wrong.
Yeah.
I was so
Nope.
wrong. And
No, it did not. Yeah.
Well, and like, is it racism or is greed? That's a neat question. Miss Princess, we got to keep debating, okay, or kind of ferreting out, because
Sure,
unfortunately, as a young child, right, I can remember being a young child, and I can visualize two uncles who came back from, I think they came from the Korean War, who couldn't really acclimate into society, back into society after being veterans, right? But then luckily, fast forward, when my husband, after he got out of the service, Patty, you know, we did a starter home because we didn't have to have a down payment, right? Okay. So that snowballs into the house I'm in today.
That's right.
But then I think back to the uncles that I used to see as a child, and they coming from the community we came from,
couldn't get
they weren't
access.
able to take advantage of those kind of things, given the times. And they just walk the streets, you know, but anyway, I digressed. Sorry, but Ms. Princess, thank you very much. And I would like to continue this conversation of, is it greed, or how much of it is greed and how much of it is racism? Jeff Bezos, that's definitely greed, because I also understand that, I mean, my opinion, because I think I've heard that the frontline workers, their salaries and their conditions are horrible, right?
Oh,
Some of
yeah.
the worst, yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, some of the worst. Well,
Can I throw in a quick
I would
thought?
say, yeah,
Uh,
I was just gonna say something real
Yeah,
quick.
Go ahead.
I think that greed can be the motivation, and then racism is a tool.
It's the
Go
tool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna throw this one thought in. I think this is it comes from a discussion I had with someone. We're talking about, you know, kind of the whole idea of like white supremacy and the system versus the individual. And I think in part of our discussion, it kind of we kind of end up zeroing in on this kind of concept. It's a real simple concept. Is that look at it this way: if your grandfather was a thief and stole, are you a thief? But are you a thief if that property that your grandfather stole, you kept and you benefited from and you refused to give back to its original owner?
Interesting. Yeah, that's it. That's a good way.
Gosh,
That's a good way to think
nice.
about it.
Nice way
Yeah.
to think
Hold
about
on now. You're cracking into my white fragility now.
Yeah. Well, see, you've been educating yourself. You know what fragility is, yeah.
You know, one little thing on that, because I've had that kind of debate. I didn't have an answer for that until recently with this restorative justice kind of thing coming. So if the goal is to repair the harm, I don't want that land that you're on, that you inherited 2 generations ago, but I do want my own land. I do want my own house. You know what I mean? Because that's what's going to make it right to me. That's what's going to repair the harm. So so you don't have to zero sum. You're not going to lose your place at all.
Yeah, yeah.
I just want to be made. I just want mine. I just want to be made whole.
Yeah, reparations is another thing I think the country owes the Black community, but how to do that, I haven't a clue. So,
Well, they've figured out how to give the Japanese reparations. There are people who get reparations, and there's ways to do it. It's just a willingness to do it, and that's just a point of information, Patty.
okay, well, I would like to learn.
Yeah, the Japanese have been getting, and the Jewish people get reparations from Germany because of the Holocaust. They get a check every month.
One of my concerns is you might say that indigenous people on the reservation get reparations, but they really don't. 40% of indigenous people living on the Navajo Nation don't have running water.
No, they don't have water.
Water.
Nope, they don't have water.
So,
Yeah,
you know,
our
you're
indigenous
welcome.
brothers and sisters, they, you know, the reservation system was not a form of reparations in any way, shape, or form. It was a form of, it was basically putting them away.
Yeah.
And you know, even when you get into like the nuts and bolts of like the generational effects of like white supremacy, racism, things of that nature, unfortunately, like our indigenous brothers and sisters are a living example of that, you know, not only were their lands taken away, their cultures, you know, stripped from them. And like I said, and Black folks, you know, we got it too, but you know, what you would think, oh, well, they have their language, they have their culture. A lot of that is damaged
Oh, yeah.
and it's traumatized. And what's worse is because of the nature of the reservation system, it's almost a scenario where they can be ignored because in how it's structured, it's like, well, we've given you the ability to self-govern and do all this type of stuff. But that means we can also give away any responsibility to undo the harm that was originally done.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, like the information people are paying attention to now, those schools. We
And
have
the-
one in Phoenix up
Yep.
here.
And the graves of the children.
Yeah,
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 how the-
yeah. In Canada,
how
yeah.
the graves of the children in Canada and
Mhm.
I mean, I'm convinced that
I-
that the same is true here in America. It's just nobody's found dug
No, it
anything
is.
up.
No,
Found them yet.
No, the same is true. I did, there was another book that that we read, I think Verna read it, just in detention centers, too, that are, way out, whatever, you have graves, kids being killed. If you don't have parental involvement or anything, kids get killed and buried on the premises, or they're dead, that's a history there. But yeah, they don't have running water, and I think a lot of people don't know that. And then, so the question would be, why? Why don't they have running water? Why, is that a zero-sum game, or is it greed, or is it racism?
And in one of my previous roles, I interfaced a lot with the San Carlos reservation, and I work with their school system out there. And what's really tragic is because of the stuff that happened with the residential schools and all this type of stuff, there is a generational fear of leaving the reservation because of what happened to their grandparents and great grandparents, and in many cases fathers and mothers, that the services that folks need, so things like healthcare, mental health care, things of that nature, folks will refuse to leave because they remember that, remember when daddy went to Phoenix and they sent him to that school and how he came back not right, or he didn't come back at all. I'm not going to go to Phoenix in 2021 to go see a therapist because how do I know they're not going to do the same thing to me?
Yeah, and this is gonna date me, but I remember when the county hospital, it's a lot better now. There were indigenous people that would not even go there for treatment because you sat in the waiting room and you died. So they saw it as a burial ground. That's how poor the services were. I mean, and we experienced similar, but they wouldn't even go there for treatment because they, just sit in a waiting room and just die of whatever your problem was. So, yeah, so there's a lot of issues. So I hope our conversations don't leave you depressed. I hope they leave you motivated. I hope they leave you motivated to fight forward, move forward, keep an open mind, keep talking about these issues. And I tend to focus on them because that's my background. But we need to take care of ourselves too. So make sure you do that.
Cool.
Okay, cool.
Okay.
Okay. All right.
Okay, I'll be looking for the next book club.
Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Great.
Thank you.
Okay.
And
Goodbye, everybody.
thank you.